Namaste. I would like to read from this book, The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita. God sent man to earth to be entertained by the cosmic movie. Alas, attachment and desire darkened human consciousness. Immersed in the seeming reality of the movie, man forgot that it was all nothing but a ray of light in the projection booth, passing through artificial images imprinted on a strip of celluloid. If man could live in this world with perfect non-attachment, he would again become aware that this is all only a show, only shadows and light. The only reality is that changeless light which produces those fleeting images, and the bliss within that light. An important point in the consolation Krishna gives Arjuna is that his is not a teaching that one should be heartless. Human love is part of divine love. It only becomes a mistake when it fixes in attachment on one or on a few particular forms. Our loved ones must be separated from us at death, whether by their death or by our own. Therefore, we should always, with discrimination, keep in mind that human beings and everything come from the same one God, who alone should receive our first love. Thus we come to stanza 40 and the beginning of Krishna's teachings on the subject of yoga. In this path of yoga action, there is no danger of unfinished business, nor are there latent within it the opposite cancelling effects of duality. Even a little practice of this religion will free one from dire fears and colossal sufferings, which are inherent in the unceasing cycles of death and rebirth. So we must understand that in this world, everything is cancelled out by something else. But in yoga, you're going to a truth that does not have an opposite. If you try to make money, you will have to lose money and become poor again. If you try to find in any other fulfillment, fame, for example, one famous man said, I enjoyed fame for a while at first, but it wasn't long before it turned to ashes. Now it means nothing to me. Money. Howard Hughes, the wealthiest man in the world at the time he lived, was asked if he had found happiness. Hughes responded in bitter tones, no, I can't say I've found happiness. Human love, what a compromise, is the most beautiful love story with infinite, divine love, with which the soul experiences at the end of its search for God. Power. Joseph Stalin, the all-powerful dictator of Russia's Soviet Union, was virtually mad toward the end of his life, fearing that everyone around him wanted to encompass his destruction. Knowledge. Look at the dry faces, the furrowed brows, the bent shoulders of people who have pursued intellectual knowledge all their lives. Hear the brittleness in their voices. No, nothing on earth brings fulfillment. And even if a few people seem to have found fulfillment for a time, none would say that what they've attained is the summum bonum of life. In only one field does perfect unanimity exist, in the search for God, and especially in those who have found Him. In every religion, in every country, in every people, those who have found God are in complete agreement. This is the goal of all human striving. Without exception, those who have found Him have willingly accepted any persecution, even painful death, to bring this realization to their fellow man. God, they know, is the only worthwhile goal in life. Yet how often those who seek Him are ridiculed, and worse than ridiculed. And so we have to understand that the goal of life If you're seeking God, it doesn't have those opposites. Every human fulfillment does. You can't have success without failure. You can't have fulfillment without disappointment. There just doesn't exist in this world. Why? Because this world is made on duality. And what is this duality? Well, let's look at it this way. God, the infinite ocean, when it created vibration. And vibration is movement in opposite directions from a point of rest in the center. And so what we see is that God, the Maya duality, is like the waves on an ocean. And for every upward wave, there has to be a downward wave. There is never any chance that an ocean its overall level will be higher just because a wave is higher. For every upward wave, there has to be a compensating downward wave. It is only in God and in the search for God that there aren't opposites. The joy that you feel in yoga practice and in meditation, there's no opposite to it. It's absolute. The love that you feel in God has no opposites, no disappointment, no betrayal. It is permanent and perfect. And so it is that we need to understand that the sign of yoga is it's a continuous and perfect thing. There is no compensation of canceling opposites. So in this yoga, there is only that one direction with no polar opposite. The reasonings of the undecided mind, caught up as it is in duality, are endlessly variegated and ramified. We have to see that this one path, the path to God, and the path of yoga to God, which is the scientific way to Him, these are the realities. O Partha, Arjuna, fixity in the state of samadhi cannot be theirs who cling to personal power and sense pleasure. Those whose discrimination is blunted by the specious promises of teachers who, ignorant themselves, promise heaven as man's highest reward, imagine nothing higher exists. Vedic rituals and other outward practices lead not to oneness with God, nor to promises or the hope of superior pleasures in the astral world. All these, rather, lead to repeated earthly rebirths. Those who, incapable of discriminating between right and wrong, seek personal power and superior sense pleasures, whether on earth or in the astral world after death, by the practice of Vedic rituals, deepen their ego attachment. They cannot achieve the inner equilibrium that comes through meditation, and they miss also the one true goal of life, which is union with God. So we must understand that the spiritual path is not a search for subtler pleasures. Many people imagine, and in fact, although Jesus Christ taught moksha, his followers don't understand that he was teaching that. Buddha taught it, and his followers don't understand. Only in India have people understood, at least in theory, that moksha is the goal of life. Moksha, complete liberation, liberation from ego, liberation from all delusion. In the Indian teachings, this is the great teaching, and anyone who thinks just to get to Swarga, he's missing the boat. You will find when you go to heaven and live in this ego, but honestly I have to say that I can't imagine a worse hell than living in a body, even an astral body, for all eternity. Your goal in life is to become one with everything, and to be stuck in this little body, that means you're always seeing yourself separate from other people. And your understanding of life will always be narrow and limited. Always practice this mental visualization of being infinite, of being cosmic. My guru said, memorize my poem Samadhi, repeat it every day. Dwell in the thought that you are not this little body, you are the infinite one who has become all bodies. In the end, that is your goal, and this is what Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, don't be worried about this little body, and don't be attached to it, what helps it or what hurts it. It just doesn't matter. Death, life, these are unimportant events. There's no such thing really as death. But if you're afraid of it, realize that sooner or later it'll have to come anyway, so why fear it? That which is inevitable may as well be accepted. Actually, as I have said earlier in these programs, a very good practice in life is to prepare yourself for that final exam of death. Prepare yourself for the time when you will have to leave everything behind. But you know, although it seems painful, although people are afraid of leaving, when they are there, they find it infinitely blissful. Death in itself is not painful. The approach to death can be painful. Cancer, all sorts of physical diseases, all these things are difficult. But when, for example, when people die in a car crash, they don't feel any pain. Actually, when people fall from a high building, let us say, or try to commit suicide by jumping off a bridge, they don't actually feel hitting the water. They're taken out of their body before that. God does not mean death to be a painful thing. It's not as if you suddenly went splat. Not at all. What you do is you realize that you have released this form and are wandering now in another form. And you can live in that world for a long time, but remember, it will not fulfill you finally, because in that world still you're stuck in a little body. Still, you have to fulfill the needs of the little body for rest, etc., etc., etc. No, what we have to do is realize that this ego is only a temporary reality. I told how the soul comes down into this world with the union of the sperm and the ovum cells, and that it creates a flash of light in the infinite, and then souls that are ready to be reborn, if they're in tune with that flash of light, then they will be reborn in that mother's womb. This is an important point to consider, because most people think that we're simply physical products of our parents. But it's not that. There's a compatibility. Actually, it will happen this way too, as my guru explained, that a saint may be born into a criminal home if they share in common a liking for peace. Sometimes there are criminals who don't like to be bothered by things. They like peace. And after all, there is a limited number of births you can take in this world, and a limited number of couples coming together who have anything in common with you. So it does happen that sometimes a saint will be born into a home of people who are far from saintly themselves. And thus you see also many young people who are not at all compatible with their parents. This is a further demonstration of the truth that it isn't your DNA. These help to decide whether you have blue eyes or green eyes or whatever it might be. They help to decide the shape of your body and so on. But basically, what you come back with is what you took away with you. And it is so interesting to consider that when you come back, you bring with you all the old tendencies. How did somebody like Mozart start composing symphonies at the age of 5? He had come with a very strong inclination toward that. In fact, what reincarnation does is help you finally to achieve what you've been wanting. You may not be able to achieve the level of a great composer in one life, but over many lives you learn to develop that ability until you can become one. Mozart is a wonderful example like that. And yet, when you come here, you may not remember that you were that. Still there's that samskar, that pull toward creating. You've all had these samskars. I've had them. And from the beginning, I had a very strong samskar to understand what life is all about. What is truth? I remember my father one time, we were in Teliagin in Romania, standing on the terrace and looking out over an apple tree. And my father said that in the millions of years it takes the life to evolve, and that life has been on this planet, each species has had its opportunity to rule the insects, the reptiles, the mammals, and so on. But he was thinking of the birds and the trees, and he said, only they haven't had their turn. And I thought, well, it's very interesting to think in terms of vastness of time and so on, but can it really be just that? Aren't we born for a reason? And he was always asking why. He was a scientist, basically. He was asking. My tendency was always to ask, why? Why do we have to go through this? Why do we live like this? And I remember, however, one time I asked my father, I remember him shaving by his mirror, and I was about 5 years old, and the eternal mystery of childhood, how Santa Claus can go to all those different homes in one night on Christmas Eve. And I said, Dad, there isn't really a Santa Claus, is there? And my dad he didn't want to destroy my sweet myth of childhood, but he didn't want to tell an untruth. And so he sort of hedged his answer, and I understood him completely. And I decided it was much more fun to believe in Santa Claus, so I still believe in him in the same spirit. Well, I say that somewhat jokingly, but still, myths are beautiful to have. And what he held up for himself was the how-to truth. Mine was why. Why do we live here? Why do we die? Why are we born? Why are we seeking truth itself? That has been my lifelong quest. And I hope with that quest to have been able to answer a few questions of yours in these programs. Joy to you.